Cheating and revenge.
I can't believe my life has gone to hell in just 4 years. 4 years ago, my wife went to work at Gilbert Endeavors. Our kids had become teenagers, and Sarah couldn't wait to get out of the house. At the time, an entry-level secretarial job seemed perfect. My name is Skip Trexler. My real name is Austin, but I've always been called Skip. I was what people would call wiry. I was of average height and weighed less than 140 pounds when I graduated from high school. I had no interest in any sports, especially competitive sports. The closest I came to anything athletic was long-range shooting. All through high school and college, I spent most of my non-academic time either shooting or reloading. After 8 years, I could consistently hit a 2-inch target from 100 yards away. My favorite gun was a Marlin 336C for a cartridge caliber. 2x19. This cartridge had been discontinued for many years, but I made my own from 30-30 cartridge cases with the neck down. Success at something like this gave me a sense of pride of accomplishment that I desperately needed. 2 important things happened during college. I met my wife Sarah and my future business partner Chuck Fuller. Other than that, it was kind of boring. I got a degree in geology, got married, and started a small surveying business with Chuck. Life was good. Chuck and I never worked for anyone. After college, we each invested $12,500 and started our own small surveying company. We focused on small jobs and lots of real estate deals. We didn't make a lot of money, but we were comfortable and happy. Chuck married a local girl 3 months after Sarah and me. My family had a cabin we called a bungalow in Schuylkill County on 160 acres. We held all our family gatherings there when I was younger. The Fullers had a real cabin on 640 acres in Potter County. Chuck and his family hunted there but didn't use it for anything else. That's all you need to know at this point. Like I said, my life started going to hell about 4 years ago. Gilbert Endeavors designed and manufactured exercise equipment. Its headquarters was local, but they had manufacturing plants and distribution centers all over the country. My wife, Sarah, started working there when our twin daughters, Marcy and Mercy, went to middle school. It seemed like a good idea at first. The hours were good, the pay was fair, and the location was convenient. The first year or so was perfect. GE hired Terry Ulrich, a retired NFL quarterback, to be the marketing manager and spokesperson for the company. Unfortunately, my wife worked in the marketing department. For 6 months, we were inundated with stories about the magnificent Terry Ulrich. My wife and daughters were crazy about his greatness. Fortunately, after about 6 months, the adoration seemed to wane. About the same time, Sarah started working overtime. Chuck and I both grew up in the area, so we knew a lot of people who worked at Gilbert. It turned out to be not hard at all to find out that Sarah and Terry Ulrich had become a couple. While their relationship was blossoming, our marriage was deteriorating. As Sarah and I grew apart, so did my relationship with my daughters. I never told her this. She began traveling more and more for business and promotional trips. I became a lowlife. Usually, but not always. She invited me to accompany her to parties and meetings where I was ignored for the rest of the evening. Sex was out of the question. How does a person endure such a life? Until Sarah started working, our family life was normal. We went on weekends and vacations as a family at least once a year. The girls took ballet lessons and played soccer. Sarah was active in PTA and Girl Scouts. We had pizza night every week. The only thing the girls didn't like was spending time in the bungalow. That was all in the past. Now it's all gone. Over the past few years, Sarah's conference retreats and meetings have gradually increased. Lately, on several longer trips, she has taken the girls with her. I was never invited or even asked if I wanted to go. I often overheard the girls telling their friends about what a great time they had. They never said anything when they knew I was within earshot. Terry Ulrich was never mentioned, although I knew he was at every outing. At the New Year's Eve party at the Gilberts, everything came to a head. Sarah had a hard time not inviting me. I didn't want to go. The humiliation of having to live with infidelity alone was bad enough. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to control myself if the situation got out of hand. I was right. The girls were all dressed to the hilt. Marcy and Mercy were excited because it was their first adult party. I didn't have a tux, so I just wore the best suit I had. When we arrived, there were several hundred people crowded around. Skip Trexler, glad to see you made it. Thanks for bringing your wife and beautiful daughters to our little gathering. Terry Ulrich seemed to smile, seeing the grimace on my face as he squeezed my hand. He finally let go of me, and I noticed Sarah smirking. The girls looked at me in disgust and quickly withdrew. It was the start of a bad evening. I drank one mug of beer and huddled it in a corner, trying not to embarrass my wife and daughters even more. I didn't say or do anything, and yet I had successfully ruined the start of their evening. Terry Ulrich was a big guy, really big. He was at least a foot taller than me and weighed 100 pounds more, all muscle. He was the epitome of a happy hand and a grandstand. My daughters crowded around the room, but my wife spent almost the entire evening by his side. Most of the time she held lightly onto his hand. A few lower-level people made feeble attempts to strike up a conversation with me. Several middle and upper-level executives noticed me and smirked or made sly remarks to their comrades that I felt were related to my cuckold status. I didn't hear any words, but it was clear what was going on. My beer had been replaced by a simple ginger ale, which I sipped slowly. I usually had pretty good self-control and prided myself on never losing my temper. A lot of people started dancing, and I noticed that the girls were having a good time, and my wife, too, with Ulrich, of course. Neither she nor the girls had spoken to me once in the last 3 hours. A small group of men and women were chatting away from the dance floor when one of the guys pointed out Sarah and Ulrich. They looked in my direction, started laughing, and quickly averted their eyes when they saw me looking at them. A few minutes later, they were still giggling. That was the end of my evening. I set my glass down, and as I headed for the door, I noticed Ulrich had his hands on my wife's ass, and she was caressing the back of his head. Before I knew it, she pulled his head down and sent him a big, sloppy kiss right in the middle of the dance floor. It took me less than 5 seconds to cross the room, turn Ulrich around, and hit him as hard as I could with my right from a U-turn. My arm hurt like hell, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up in the back of an ambulance. It was only a few minutes' drive to the emergency hospital, and I noticed that I was alone in the ambulance. I remembered being rolled into the emergency room. The next thing I remember is waking up in some sort of recovery area. Half an hour later, I was visited by a doctor who gave me an update on my condition. In addition to a broken arm, I had 3 broken ribs, a broken nose, 3 knocked-out teeth, and 2 loosened teeth. My jaw was wired shut, and my right kidney was bruised. Ulrich finished him off with a good kick to the testicles, causing several blood vessels to be damaged. The doctor said I could be discharged in about 4 days, but I would have to spend at least 2 weeks in a rehab center. If I wanted, they could arrange for me to rehab at home. I chose the first option. It was well past noon when my wife and daughters finally showed up. Sarah looked annoyed and the girls looked bored. No one said anything. Since my jaw was tense, I didn't feel like starting any conversation. I could talk, but I didn't want her to know it. "Well, Skip, what do you have to say for yourself?" I quickly assessed her attitude and decided I didn't need this conversation. Instead of trying to answer her, I just muttered and pointed to my jaw. We must have sat there for a good minute before she spoke again. "I was embarrassed, Skip. The girls were so humiliated that we had to leave before New Year's Eve. The whole evening was ruined, and for what? I should have known how I'd end up taking you out in public. I guarantee it won't happen again." She had no idea how right she was. I just sat there and stared at her. I couldn't even squeeze out a smile, so I did nothing. They lingered for a few minutes. Since I didn't react in any way, they eventually just got up to leave. Chuck showed up a couple hours later. We chatted for a few minutes. Yes, I could talk. and then he pulled out the local newspaper. I made the front page. Local NFL hero protects wife and daughters from abusive father. The attached story described how I assaulted my wife while she was dancing at the annual Gilbert Endeavors New Year's Eve party. Terry Ulrich burst into the room and held me down until I was taken away. Not exactly how I remembered it, but it's a story people will believe. Chuck and I talked for a couple hours and discussed several options. After he left, I refused dinner and asked for sleeping pills. I needed a good long rest. I spent most of the next day being checked, probed, and poked. All the damage had been discovered and dealt with accordingly. Now all I had to do was wait and heal. One of the hospital staff gave me a list of recommended rehab centers in the area. I chose one near Hamburg. Chuck showed up later that evening. I sold him my share of the company for $2,500. Of course, the handshake in the deal was the most important thing. I was still a part owner, but not on paper. All good things come in good time. We laughed about the fact that 1 week in rehab cost $2,500. Sarah and the girls never saw me again at the hospital. They actually came back the day after I moved into the rehab center, and I understand they were very annoyed that they had not been notified. They were very angry when they came to rehab and were denied access. I seemed to be able to indicate who could and could not visit when I logged in. One of the orderlies let me know they were trying to meet me. My ribs hurt like hell when I laughed. The worst part of my injuries was dealing with my teeth. Luckily, they had a dentist who could work on site for a certain fee. I decided to take advantage of that. The wound on my hand turned out to be not as serious as they initially thought. Although I had the opportunity to get out of rehab a little early, I decided to stay for the full 2 weeks. After 10 days, I was able to breathe fully again. It felt good. Sarah never tried to visit me again. On the second weekend in February, the National CrossFit Expo was held in Atlantic City. Sarah and the girls attended along with Terry Ulrich and the GE marketing team. Chuck and several of our staff spent the weekend moving my clothes and belongings to a bungalow in Schuylkill County. He made sure to pick up my Marlin and all my reloading supplies. 2 days later, I was comfortably settled into my new abode. That weekend, Chuck and his wife, June, came to visit. It seems Sarah was just looking for me at the office. No bank deposits had been made into the joint account since the beginning of the year, and Sarah wanted an explanation. Chuck spent half an hour trying to explain to her that not only did I no longer own part of the company, but I didn't even work there. In desperation, she ran out, threatening to see a lawyer. Within a couple weeks, I was functioning quite normally. My jaw situation wasn't as bad as they originally thought, so I was back to eating and drinking normally within a couple days. My dental problem was fixed, and I decided to leave my broken nose alone. I needed the little piece of character it added. The rest of the bruises and aches were healing normally. I did therapy and exercised as instructed. Chuck left me with one of the company trucks and a credit card. I also took a large amount of cash with me in case I needed it. I left my cell phone with Chuck. The bungalow was cozy, but only temporarily. I walked around a bit and started jogging leisurely. Terry Ulrich had a big house on Duryea Street just outside of town. It was a long, winding road leading up Penn Mountain. There were few houses there because it was difficult to build on the steep mountainside. It wasn't hard to find a house, and I was able to find some good, secluded vantage points. Every morning, I exercise and get in shape. In the afternoons, I do target shooting. I focus on inanimate targets. My Bushnell laser rangefinder was showing that I needed to be accurate at 133 yards. I'll be ready when I can consistently take an egg out from that distance. I bought a lot of eggs. I bought a muffler. I spend my evenings planning, adjusting, and reloading. I started growing a beard. Chuck came to see me about once every 2 weeks. Sarah stopped by the office a few times, still trying to find me. After 2 months, she gave up. Chuck always brought a few newspaper clippings with him. Turns out my wife and daughters were still enjoying the social life with their new benefactor. He must have been fully supporting her by now because I wasn't doing anything. Strangely, Sarah and the girls were still living in our old house, which I didn't realize. It was time to move on. I started heading back into town early in the morning to pick a good vantage point to watch Terry's house. He was a man of habit. I never expected such a big guy to be a swimmer, but he did 50 laps every morning. Naturally, the pool was heated. That weekend, I traveled to Potter County. The move from the bungalow to the cabin was quite welcome. No electricity, no running water, no cell phone signal. It was a 45-minute drive to the nearest Walmart store in Olean, NY. I didn't want to drive in the winter, so I stocked up on everything I needed for the next 4 months at least. If I forgot something or needed something, I could get it before the bad weather shut me down. Early Wednesday morning, I drove to the office and moved all my stuff from the truck into my Subaru Outback. I parked the company truck at a construction site at the base of the mountain and pulled up to my chosen vantage point. At this time of the morning, there were no other cars. I set up my tripod. I had one round in the camera and one in the tube, with the next two at the ready. 20 minutes later, Terry Ulrich came out for his morning swim. The first shot shattered his right ankle. Even with a silencer, it was very noisy this early in the day. 2 seconds later, his left knee exploded. I loaded the next 2 rounds and took out his left elbow. My final target was his right wrist, which I couldn't aim at because of his erratic movements, so I quickly collected my weapon and quietly left. 10 minutes later, I left the construction site and returned to the office to my waiting Subaru. I didn't return to the bungalow, but drove straight to Potter County. The first order of business was to clean the spring so I would have fresh water. Then I had to start gathering a good supply of firewood. Fortunately, the cabin was waterproof and well insulated. The LED lights were much better and cheaper than the old charcoal oil lamps that were there. Soon it was completely under control and I started shooting again, this time at paper targets. The first time I saw her was in the middle of the second week. A tall, lanky woman dressed in jeans, a flannel shirt, and a vest. Although she was far away, I could see she had a backpack or something on her back. She walked past on an old logging trail that stretched along an open area that served as a shooting range. 640 acres, and I still had no privacy. Of course, it was much more practical to build a cabin next to the road where I could bring materials. One day, when I had the opportunity, I pointed a scope at her. She had an elaborate crossbow hanging from her shoulder. I had no idea what she was doing with it, but I was curious. There was a small fire pit barbecue area on the stove, so I brought along an old galvanized coffee pot and some cookies. Yes, I baked some really good cookies. I felt like I was setting some kind of trap. 3 days later, my trap went off. "I beg your pardon. My name is Claire. I was hoping we could talk." She took me by surprise. I was stuttering a little, so I gestured for her to sit down. "Would you like some coffee?" It was the best I could do. She nodded, smiled, and took the crossbow off her shoulder before sitting down. "My name's Skip. I got here about a week or 2 ago. I've noticed you in the neighborhood a few times. I'm staying at a gatehouse about a mile from here. I try to walk every day and usually end up here." I handed her one of my famous cookies. "Are you going to be here long?" "I'm staying here until the end of the summer. And you?" "At least 4 or 5 months." She seemed to like my cookies, but I got the feeling she would have preferred cream and sugar in her coffee. She didn't say anything. I just kind of caught it. "Is this your property?" "No. It belongs to a friend of mine who lets me use it." "Do you hunt?" "No, not really. I used to shoot a little, but I haven't for years. Now I just do a little target shooting. I don't want to be intrusive, but you won't mind if I use this shooting range for a little practice. I haven't found any suitable places where I can use my bow." She had an accent I couldn't identify. It was either English, Australian, or Scottish. I didn't want to ask. "No, not at all. I think we could find something suitable for targeted support. Feel free to use it any time." She ate a second cookie. It felt really good. "I was just curious. I thought most people use compound bows nowadays. You have a curved bow, and it looks new. Take my word for it. It has better recurve. She used simple arrows for target shooting, but always carried 4 hunting arrows attached to the bow. That evening, I drove a few miles down the road and picked up 3 bales of hay. Thus began my summer with Claire Charles. Claire came every day and returned to her lodge every evening. The staff at the lodge had a tracker on her cell phone, so they always knew where she was. It was the beginning of our second week when a heavy summer squall hit us. We huddled on the cabin porch, laughing and bantering about her dilemma. Without saying anything, she pulled out her cell phone and called the lodge. She informed them that due to the weather, she would not be able to return tonight and that she had found a comfortable place to stay for the night. I was both surprised and delighted. Thus, my platonic relationship with Claire Charles became intimate. From then on, we alternated our sleeping quarters. Highlands Lodge was totally out of place in Potter County. It was posh and very expensive. Most of their guests were from across the ocean. Claire's family was from Cornwall. The Highland had hot showers, plentiful food, and laundry facilities, which I took full advantage of. Sex in the wild is fun, but it's much nicer when you have everything you need. We spent less and less time at the shooting range. A couple weeks later, while Claire and I were busy eating lunch, Chuck and June arrived. June seemed especially happy to have a companion, and even more so when she realized it was a fulfilling relationship. We kept a low profile for the first few hours, and then June and Claire went off to chat. After the tragic attack on Terry Ulrich, I became the first suspect. This turned out to be a much bigger problem for Terry than he realized. The press wanted to know why I was the prime target of interest. The more they delved into it, the worse it got for Terry and my wife. While the focus was on finding me, the press quickly shifted to the relationship between Terry and my wife. 3 weeks later, Terry Ulrich was no longer a representative of Gilbert and Devers. Police visited the bungalow in Schuylkill County and found it empty. They had no credit card leads, no phone calls, and no idea where I might be. They never asked Chuck about the cabin. Chuck mentioned that Sarah had come to the office several times in a vain attempt to find out where I was. She seemed a little desperate as her source of money began to dry up. According to Chuck, it appeared that Terry had lost interest in her and was blaming her for her problems. I didn't have a plan for the next step. I couldn't go back, and I had no other options I wanted to explore. At this point, I was drifting. As we approached the end of the year, I felt myself becoming complacent. I was happy and content with Claire, but I should have been paying attention to my real life. It was a cool fall day, and I was alone in the cabin. Something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what it was. I had just warmed up the wood stove and brewed coffee when the door suddenly opened. Terry Ulrich was as big and ugly as the last time I'd seen him. He stood in the open doorway with a wide grin on his face and an old police SWAT pistol in his right hand. He seemed to be standing unsteady and holding his left arm at a strange angle, as if he was trying to keep his balance. We just stood there looking at each other. I expected some profound words of revenge, but nothing followed. "Coffee? Asshole. I spent over $10,000 to find you. No, I don't want any coffee." "Well, what can I do for you?" "I know it was you, you sneaky little weasel. Your wife told me you did a lot of target shooting. I hope there's 911 service here, because you're gonna need it." His face swelled and reddened as he spoke. He seemed to be driving himself to some sort of frenzy. Suddenly, a shocked expression appeared on his face. He dropped the gun and dropped to one knee. Terry Ulrich rolled over on the floor and howled at the top of his voice. About 12 inches of crossbow arrow was sticking out of his left buttock. The other 6 inches was buried deep and solid. Claire just stood in the doorway and smiled. We ran most of the way back to Highland. I didn't take anything with me from the cabin. It took Claire about 15 minutes to load all her stuff into the rented Land Rover. We laughed the whole time like a couple of high school kids. We finally calmed down to a fairly normal state when we reached US 80. Breakfast was comforting and hearty. "I'm assuming he's already retrieved the arrow and gone to the hospital." I don't think so. He should call 911. I shot him with one of those hunting arrows with the three-bladed head. It needs to be cut out. It can't be pulled out. He'll probably have to lie on his stomach on a gurney when he goes to the emergency room. That must be awkward. Well, Ms. Claire, looks like we're in big trouble now, and it's all your fault. She flicked her fork full of scrambled eggs and laughed. After breakfast, I called Chuck, and Claire called someone else. I filled him in on the situation, and he seemed to find it quite amusing. I told him we were going to Ocala, Florida, where my grandparents lived. He chuckled slightly because he knew I only said that to cover his ass. While I was on the phone, Claire walked over and took my wallet out of my pocket. She went back to her seat and continued talking while I bought goodies for our trip. I didn't know where we were going, but I sensed that Claire had a plan. She didn't tell me anything, and I didn't ask. I was content in my ignorance and trusted her. It was a long day. We finally checked into a beautiful bed and breakfast in the Wisconsin valleys. We were wrecked from the road and just slept soundly. Breakfast was great, and 4 hours later we were at the Walmart supermarket in Duluth. Claire had her stuff, but I left with nothing. I had no idea what was on her mind, and she seemed to be having fun keeping me in the dark. I got a new closet, and Claire got a big bag of snacks. Ever since I was a boy, I had dreamed of a canoe trip on the lakes. I finally managed to make it happen. Everything was arranged when we arrived. The outfitter was even going to take care of Claire's rental car. That gave me a hint that we probably wouldn't be coming back. It was intriguing and exciting. I couldn't wait to see what else she had in store for me. Before we left, I made one last call to Chuck. Skip, what, did you do it? It's all over the news here about Ulrich's latest debacle. Even some of the national outlets are picking up on it. Chuck, I have no idea what you're talking about. I heard June laughing in the background. Well, his media image is dropping like a lead balloon. He can't seem to do anything right. Nothing like this could happen to a nicer guy. I've always wanted to say that. By the way, Skip, divorce is a good move. Sarah didn't see that coming, and it really hit her hard. I don't know how you did it, but it seems to be working. She has no idea what to do, and she has no money. Chuck, trust me. I'm not kidding. I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never even seen a lawyer. Are you sure about the divorce? Yep. She waved it in my face and ranted about it just this morning. Well, it was nice to get some good news for a change. By the way, can't you stop by the cottage and have someone pick up my stuff and car? No problem. Where are you now? Moss Bluff, Florida. I'm looking for a trailer to rent. Claire was standing on the dock waving at me. The canoe was loaded to the gills. I thanked my parents for making me go to Boy Scout camp when I was younger. At least I didn't feel like a complete idiot in the canoe. For the next 6 days, we paddled the lakes. We had a new camp each night. Claire knew where she was going and used her cell phone GPS to get there. I was with her and enjoyed the trip. The best part of the trip was that we enjoyed sex under the stars. The next day at noon, our adventure continued. A man met us at a small dock on a remote road. He and Claire hugged and spoke in French. After about half an hour, he handed Claire the keys to the truck along with a large envelope. We got our stuff out of the canoe and moved down the road. I looked out the back window and saw him pushing off from the dock. I sat behind the wheel, and Claire started going through the envelope. I guess I better get used to calling you Clinton. Of course, I threw her a strange look. She giggled and handed me a Canadian driver's license with my picture on it. The name on the driver's license was Clinton Barfield. You're kidding, right? No. You're Clinton Barfield now, and you have a new Canadian passport. She waved it proudly in front of my face. We're in Canada? Of course we are, silly. 4 days later, we landed in Newquay. 2 hours later, we were at Claire's family home near St. Austell. It was like I'd been born here. I felt comfortable and satisfied. I was very anxious about meeting Claire's family. The mansion was huge. Her father asked me to join him in the study. An elegant walnut armoire stood against the far wall. I watched with interest as he reached inside and pulled out a rifle. He held it out to me and smiled. It was my Marlin 336C chambered. I realized I was home. I never saw or heard from Sarah or the girls again. Chuck and June received strange Christmas cards every year from Mr. and Mrs. Clinton Barfield. They had no idea. This year's card will have a picture of us with 3 kids on it. I'm sure he'll figure it out. Was there ever really a Terry Ulrich? The end! Subscribe to my channel. Thank you!